Hi everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar focused on the release of the new similar school comparison reports. I'm Laura Walklett and I work on communications for the Daily Attendance Data Programme. Next slide, please. Just to begin with a few housekeeping notes. So this webinar is being recorded and will be published on YouTube after the session. Once the recording is available, we will send the link to the email address that you used to register for today. You'll be able to ask questions at any time using the Q&A feature that you can see on the right-hand side. And we'll also be using that Q&A to post useful links throughout the session. So do keep an eye on that for additional resources. We are unfortunately aware of a bug where hyperlinks aren't working in the Q&A at the moment. So what we will do is we will post the full link and you'll just need to copy and paste those into your web browser. We'll also share a link to the survey at the end of the call, and we welcome your feedback on how we can improve future sessions and what you'd like to see in those. So just a little bit of a rundown of what we're going to cover today. So first of all, we're going to have a formal welcome from Sir Kevan Collins, who is a lead non-executive board member at the Department for Education. We'll have an overview of the attendance challenge. We'll explain to you some new features in the Similar Schools comparison reports, including the naming of higher performing schools and understanding attendance baseline improvement expectations, also known as ABIEs. We'll hear from Jayne Lowe OBE on how to use the new features and also have a case study from a trust on using the new features. We'll show you how to access your reports, and we'll also explain other attendance tools available to you in Monitor Your School Attendance. But first of all, I will hand over for an official welcome to Sir Kevan Collins, who is a lead non-executive board member here at the Department for Education. Thank you. Kevan, we can't hear you, you're on mute. Thank you.
So that was a very good start, Kevin. Well done. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this webinar. And it's great to see so many people, thousands of people are on the call. And that's because I guess we all know just how important attendance is. We won't go to that a bit more. And it's great later you'll hear from Jayne Lowe and Alex who will take you through the detail. My job is just to formally welcome you. I'd like to start by sort of celebrating the success. It's important for us to reflect on the fact that we've made fantastic progress. Well, schools have made fantastic progress in the last academic year. Some numbers: 5 million more days in the classroom compared to the year before, 140,000 fewer pupils persistently absent. This really matters. We know that, the evidence tells us that, and that's a huge kind of step forward for those children and for the system and their peers as well, because we know that persistent absence and severe absence impacts on your peers as well as on the young person who's missing school. Although we've made that progress, there's a lot more to do. The gains we've made haven't been universal. In fact, only 2/3 of schools saw improvements last year, so a third have not seen improvements since the pandemic, and we need to get back to pre-pandemic attendance levels. This matters because we know that improving attendance is fundamental to our broader mission. It impacts on attainment, well-being, safeguarding, and of course teaching time and the attainment of all children. So today we're going to hear a lot more about the attendance baseline improvement expectation, the ABIEs as they're affectionately known. They help us set, if you like, the minimum expected improvement for your school, and that sets, as you've seen in the examples, on a ladder of improvement. It sets the ladder that gives you the minimum, and then it sets the ladder that takes you all the way back to pre-pandemic levels. What's important about the ABIEs is they're not in any way set up as a kind of stick to beat or an accountability tool. They're there to lift, if you like, our floor in attendance and to learn from each other. They provide a pathway back to pre-pandemic attendance levels, and they support schools that might not be making the progress they want to make. Interestingly, and we've got a lot to learn, we're trying to use the best insights we can from information and intelligently, because the ABIE is tailored to your own circumstances. I expect many of you will deliver the improvements well above your ABIE because all they're doing at the moment is setting the minimum standard, because we know that your expectations and your ambitions for your children are very high. Alongside the ABIE, we've also provided you with the names of schools that are similar to yours in a number of ways. Of course, there's never ever a perfect match, but they're similar to your school that have really great records on improving attendance. And we've provided those names so we can learn from each other. fundamental to the whole department theory of improvement is that we learn from each other. We learn the best reference points in our system are great schools and great trusts and great local authorities who are already doing the job. And therefore, we're keen to share those names so we can talk to each other and learn from each other. That's where the wisdom lies in the system. There has been lots of talk about the methodology. It's been accessed, the ABIE, by thousands of schools. And one of the things we want to do in this first year is test this with you. We want to find out whether we're matching you with schools you recognise as your own, or whether we need to make adjustments. No model is perfect. We've matched you on the things that matter most for attendance, but we want to hear from you and how that's working. So we want your feedback so we can improve the tool, learn as we go, and continue to test and learn as we develop these insights that big data provide for us and help us learn from each other. And so today is the start of a journey we're working on. We want you to challenge us. We want you to ask us questions, but approach the next 45 minutes or so with an open mind. And afterwards, access your report, see what it can offer you and your school, and see if there are schools that are doing a really great job, or you're one of those schools where you can either learn from them or you want to begin to help others learn from you, because we all have stuff to learn and we all have stuff to share. I want to thank you once again for all the work you're doing all the time, of course, to support improving attendance for our young people. We're making great progress, but we've got a lot more we need to do if we're going to get back to those pre-pandemic levels. And now it's my job to hand over to Alex, who's going to start walking through the details. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon. My name's Alex Turner. I work in the school attendance policy team here at DFE. I'm going to start with a bit of background. So if we can go on to the next slide. Looking at the attendance challenge means going back to well before the pandemic. So we'll start with the graph on the left here that shows you how big the attendance challenge is post-pandemic. The graph shows the historic absence rates we've seen. The orange line shows you persistent absence, the blue line overall absence, and the green line severe absence. And following the pandemic, you can see how steeply overall and persistent absence rose. Now, what you'll see is that between sort of 2006, 2007, those numbers fell and became quite stable. Before that sort of significant jump we saw. But what Kevin's just talked about is the progress we made in the academic year 24-25, where we saw real gains. The efforts across the system saw 5 million more days in school and 140,000 fewer persistently absent children. But again, as Kevin alluded to at the start, those gains weren't universal, with 1/3 of schools not seeing those attendance improvements. An improvement across the system is necessary if we're to get back to pre-pandemic levels. One trap we need to avoid falling into is measuring only against national average, and that becoming an anchor for securing further gains, getting across that threshold and then turning to other problems, prioritising those other problems. The anchor we need is the system absence levels in sort of 2018-19, not the new high levels of absence we see now. And that's what we should be aiming for. In the webinars last year, we talked about the introduction of the Similar Schools reports that provide you with insight and intelligent benchmarks and analysis, and they allow you to compare yourself to schools that look like you. But the bigger news is the two recent developments we've had, and that's what we'll take you through shortly. One built around support and one more at the challenge end. But before we look at those, it's just worth pausing on the context and the approach we're taking, which is where we think it presents real scope for gain. So if we can look at the next slide, if you came to any of our conferences earlier in the year, you'll have seen this chart before. This gives you the national distribution of absence in the academic year 23-24. And across the x-axis, you have all of the levels of bands of absence. On the left-hand side, you've got children attending absolutely every day. And on the right-hand side, you've got children not attending school at all. And on the y-axis, you've got the number of children. What this tells you is that absence is at least two distinct problems. On the left-hand side, we've got large numbers of children, around 2.6 million children, absent occasionally. And then on the right-hand side, we've got that smaller number of children, the 170,000, who are absent more than they're present. And the key thing to recognise is that the drivers of these two problems are quite distinct. On the left, That's where leaders tell us schools can have a big impact and hold many of the levers, whereas on the right, you see the more complicated absences, where the responsibilities sit between schools and local authority or wider services. I want to be clear, this isn't an and/or problem, and we know that a twin track strategy distinctly targeting both ends of the problem is how we secure gains across the system. And the good news is that evidence tells us that a range of school level approaches can bring about big differences in outcomes, reducing the variation between how effectively schools manage the left-hand side of this chart through the kinds of practices used by attendance and behaviour hubs and some of the schools we've talked about in these webinars before. If we go on to slide 8, that's where we'll start. And we're going to take you through those 2 new features. Firstly, the naming of higher performing schools in your reports, and the second, the attendance baseline improvement expectations. We'll take you through these first, and then for those of you not sure how to access these reports, we'll do the how do I find these question at the end of the webinar. Before we get into the naming of schools, let's just do a quick reminder on what the Similar Schools reports tell you. The Similar Schools reports provide a sort of like-for-like comparison, matching you to 20 schools that face similar challenges to you, schools with comparable levels of deprivation, special educational needs, similar funding, and location. These provide an intelligent alternative to judging attendance solely against national average, and includes solely against national average, which of course includes schools in very different circumstances. The Similar Schools report, and Charles Livesey will explain this in a bit more detailed later, balance machine learning and expert judgment to identify those schools that we compare you to. And we'll talk a bit about that later on. On the next slide, when you first received these reports, we were overwhelmed by the feedback from the sector to ask to see the schools that we're comparing you against, in particular those higher performing schools. So in response to that, the report that we released a couple of weeks ago now includes those higher performing schools across overall and persistent absence. Not only does this provide you with greater transparency on the schools we're comparing you against, but it also provides an opportunity for you to reach out to those schools and create networks with schools in similar circumstances. Later, Jayne Lowe will talk to you about how you might approach those sorts of conversations and the sorts of things you might want to get into as you engage with other schools. But for now, I just wanted to pause on those of you here who may be being named as one of the higher performing schools in the groups. So let's talk about what you might expect. If you could go on to the next slide, please. Firstly, to reassure you, higher performing schools won't be named in hundreds of reports. It's likely you'll be named in around 20 schools, 20 other schools' reports. These schools may reach out to you via sort of publicly available contact information, or in many cases, you may already know them and have an existing relationship with that school. While you don't have to respond, your performance on attendance places you in a pretty unique position to help others to benefit from what's working well in your setting. So please do share what works, be open about your approaches and strategies, and share the details of not just the what you do, but critically how you do those things, because we know that's what really matters. Be honest, share the challenges as well as your successes, and build those connections to form professional relationships. But don't feel pressured, respond at a time that works for you. We know, and saw it through the conferences, that sort of communities of practice are really forming around school attendance up and down the country, and these reports are intended to help expand on that. So having talked a bit about similar schools, let's turn to the other new feature, which is the attendance baseline improvement expectation. I'll start with what it is. First of all, the attendance baseline improvement expectation is simply the minimum amount we expect a school to improve its overall attendance by this academic year, expressed in percentage points and added to your 24-25 attendance level. Every mainstream school in the country has a baseline improvement expectation tailored to context and past attendance. And they won't be formally introduced until the academic year 2026-27, but you have an indicative version in your reports. And as Kevin talked about earlier, we want to learn and iterate the model based on your feedback. In a second, I'll pass to Charles, who will talk to you about how we calculated the attendance baseline improvement expectations, but a couple of quick contextual points. We're aware that quantitative targets carry risks, so we've designed these carefully. First, this is a floor lifting goal aimed at consistency and supporting and challenging the parts of the system not improving. The level means that in practice, it won't impact on all schools. It's positioned in a broader ladder of benchmarks with similar schools, average, top quarter, and pre-COVID levels. And we want schools to aim high, with the ABIE set as a sort of fair and achievable minimum. Second, they're contextualized, as Charles will explain, reasonably achievable because it reflects what similar schools are already demonstrating. Third, the consequences are proportionate. Missing the expectation acts as a prompt for support, not intervention. For example, it could lead to being referred to an attendance or behaviour hub for support, or trust or local authority follow-up and discussion with the department around school progress. Not a trigger for Ofsted or RISE targeted support. The ABIE is private and unpublished. And fourth, there's an expanded support offer. As well as naming the high performing schools, we announced a further 36 attendance and behaviour hubs a couple of weeks ago, 57 now in total, rising to 90 from January. And we've updated the toolkit with new material on transition, which is particularly important now, as this is the half term where we know that year 7 attendance can particularly fall quite sharply. I'll pass now to Charles Livesey, who will talk a bit more about the detail around how we've calculated the attendance baseline improvement expectations.
Thanks, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Charles, and I'm an analyst at the DFE. My team helped develop the ABIE approach, and today I want to explain two things, the analytical principles that underpin ABIEs and then how we calculated them. So if we move on to the next slide, to understand why we calculated ABIEs in the way that we did, I'm going to run through some of the core principles that inform the approach. So firstly, as we've already heard, the sector's made huge strides, and last year saw the biggest improvement to attendance in a decade. However, on the flip side, a large proportion of schools are still below pre-pandemic levels, and a third last year were flat or slipped back. So ABIEs are a part of a wider effort to keep that positive momentum going, and we've calibrated ABIEs to sustain improvement, but on a more consistent basis. We want all schools to have an achievable ABIE. We did consider a flat target for all schools, but that would have been unfair, too tough for some and too easy for others. Instead, ABIEs try to reflect where each school is starting from. So if we move on to the next slide, we can roll up our sleeves and get into how ABIEs have been calculated. To start with, it's important to know that each ABIE has two parts, a fixed component, which is 0.1 percentage points for every school, and a context-based component, and this varies between schools and depends on A, your attendance last year, and B, the rank amongst similar schools. We used a technique called logit adjustment to make sure that the target remains realistic. In practice, this means that schools with lower attendance and lower ranking simple, fair, evidence-based expectations. The full formula is included in the methodology, and this is available on VIED. If we move on to the next slide, I'm going to walk a little bit through now about how we identified similar schools. And this is where the AI element comes in, but it doesn't involve anything like ChatGPT or prompts or large language models or anything like that. So what we did to start with was build a machine learning model in-house to identify the factors that matter most for attendance. We tested hundreds of millions of combinations, as well as cross-referencing with expert judgment and the wider literature. And after doing this, 7 factors really stood out, which were FSM rates, SEND, EAL, IDACI, geography, rural versus urban classification, and funding. It's important to say that we couldn't include every possible factor. If we'd done this, we would have risked adding complexity without necessarily improving accuracy. Many influences are already captured indirectly. So for example, things like funding reflect a range of underlying characteristics like staffing and resources. There are other factors that you might think are material that in fact don't explain a lot of variation between schools once you sort of factor in the things that we've already included. So for example, school size. If there is a factor that you're thinking about, the chances are that we've already considered it. We also sense checked the outputs of the model against a range of sources. This included other analysis, stakeholder input, and also the wider attendance literature. So when you see your similar schools, you can be confident that they're evidence-based and not based on guesswork. So we have these 7 factors. What we did next is we used these to group schools into clusters of around 20 using a statistical method called weighted Euclidean distance. This is a tried and tested approach for using schools, for grouping schools. And if you look at the chart on the right, this sort of gives a demonstration of how this works. This ensures that your similar schools really are similar in ways that affect attendance and not just based on surface level characteristics. As Kevin said at the start, we are going to be using this year to gain feedback and to continue to refine and improve the approach. So handing back to Alex now.
Thanks, Charles. Thank you. So in summary, here are some key things to keep in mind when you're thinking about attendance baseline improvement expectations. We've introduced them to support consistent improvement across all mainstream schools. Indicative ABIEs for 25-26 are available to you now in your similar schools comparison report, which we'll show you how to access later if you're unsure. And then official attendance baseline improvement expectations will be introduced in the academic year 26-27. As we've said a couple of times, we're using this year to take feedback from you, learn and iterate as we go. They're not linked to direct accountability and they're not shared with Ofsted. And schools falling significantly short of their baseline improvement expectation may be signposted to universal support offers or receive more enhanced support through regional teams and our RISE attendance and behaviour hubs. And critically, they're part of a ladder of improvement. We want schools to target and realise big improvements using the insights that the reports offer, with these baselines the backstop or floor. We'll now hear from Jayne Lowe, DFE Attendance and Behaviour Ambassador, who will talk you through how you might use the reports in practice.
Hello, I'm Jayne Lowe, one of the DFE's Attendance and Behaviour Ambassadors. My expertise and experience in attendance comes from leading on attendance in schools, within a local authority, and now advising schools on best practice. You've heard today about some of the new features in the report, and what I wanted to do was take you through how the schools that I'm working with are using the reports in their own settings, which might offer you some ideas on how to use the report in your setting and also to secure the support that's right for you. The data we're going to share and the examples that you see are purely illustrative, so they might not be consistent between slides. One of the first things that you're going to see when you open the report is your attendance baseline improvement expectation. You've already heard today why the department has introduced ABIEs and how your ABIE has been calculated. But it is worth reiterating that in order for us to get back to pre-pandemic levels of attendance, all schools need to secure improvements. So when looking at your report, the first step is to consider the minimum improvement that you should look to make this academic year. On this slide, you can see that this school's indicative ABIE for 25-26 is 0.4%. That's the minimum improvement this school is expected to make. And meeting that minimum expectation is going to mean that pupils in this school are collectively in classrooms where they should be for an additional 1,107 extra days compared to last year. When it comes to ABIEs, it's really important to keep looking up and not simply focusing on the bottom line. The second step is to contextualise your ABIE. It's incredibly important that you don't look at your ABIE in isolation, but rather as one rung on your ladder of improvement back to at least your school's pre-pandemic levels. I've said for a long time that poor attendance is the educational challenge of our generation, and we've got to be bold in our ambition. And your school attendance improvement ladder, or SAIL, shows how your school can move beyond your ABIE with your pre-pandemic attendance and the attendance of the strongest performing schools that are similar to yours as useful reference points. It provides you with a pathway towards pre-pandemic levels or higher. The higher up the ladder your school gets, the greater the impact on the children and young people in your school. So in this example, the school's ABIE is a reasonably modest improvement on last year's attendance. You can see that its current attendance is tracking at 1.3 percentage points above its ABIE. So the challenges for this school then are twofold. Firstly, sustaining the improvements on last year and avoiding any mid-year drop. And secondly, really working to climb the ladder as much as possible back towards pre-pandemic levels of attendance. After you've considered your ABIE and your ladder of improvement, the third step to take is to look at your school's headline attendance measures from last half term compared with your similar schools. Remember, these comparisons are not against local or national averages, but against the median attendance of your similar schools. You can see in this example that this school's overall attendance is just under 1% from the median of similar schools, and its persistent absence is slightly above similar schools. Taking note of this is a really useful reference point to come back to when you look to consider the routes of support that are available to you. Steps 4 and 5 are really significant features of the similar schools comparison report that I just love. It's super important to recognise that attendance is a really complicated issue, and all schools are going to have elements of strengths and elements where they need to have more focus. But I'm really clear that as well as using the report to identify where we need to make gains, schools also need to use it to celebrate where they perform well and build on those strengths in their data. In this example, you can see that this school is achieving some good things for Year 7. Pupils with SEND support, and on Tuesday afternoons it's going well. Whilst it's not perfect, this school should be considering what strategies they've got in place for Year 7, those pupils with SEND, and replicating them for other cohorts. They might also wish to look for anything within the school calendar, the timetable, maybe even the canteen menu, which is driving higher attendance on Tuesdays. With that in mind, the next step is to consider the suggested areas of focus. These are the areas that the report's identified as potential areas where you can make gains, because many of your similar schools are doing so. So in this example, this school's suggested areas of focus is pupils with who are eligible for free school meals, Year 11s, and also Fridays. So if I was having a conversation with this school, I'd be asking them a number of things. First of all, I'd want to know what is working for your SEND cohort that isn't working for the free school meals cohort, and how are you targeting that key Year 11 group. I'd also want to know what's happening on Tuesdays that is encouraging high attendance that isn't happening on Fridays. It could be simple things such as timetabling, rooming, staffing. The sixth step to take is to look at the performance of children eligible for free school meals and those with SEND. Remember again, these comparisons that you see here are not against local or national averages, but against the median attendance of your similar schools. You can see in this example that this school's overall attendance is 1% from the median of similar schools for children eligible for free school meals, and 0.3% above for children with SEND. These are the areas of strength I alluded to in the previous slide around SEND, and also that area of focus around children eligible for free school meals. Again, take note of this. It's a really useful reference point to come back to when we look at the routes of support that are available to you. The 7th step to take is to ensure that you've got a really firm grip on your absence distribution. So be minded here again to focus on your strengths to begin with. You can see in the slide the distribution of absence within this school. So focus on the strengths first. Identify the proportions of pupils sitting in that top band. However, take note of the drop-off across year groups, as you can see in the example here, the shift from year 7 right through to year 11. There's a significant transition issue here that we can see also reflected in the PA rates within this school too. And don't forget, if you want to find out more or look at the interactive data around this particular absence distribution, you can do that within VIED. The second thing to look at here are the winnable pupils. So take a look at bands 2 and 3. These are the children that can be nudged upwards with ease, with input from class teachers, form tutors, having really strong attendance culture and robust procedures. Then we need to look towards the bottom of the table to ensure that we know who our PA and SA children are, and to also ensure that the wider team know who those children are too. We should be tracking the progress of these children really carefully in partnership with those pupils and their families, and focusing on the steps they need to move up and out of that band. For pupils with the most complex absence issues, we should be engaging with external partners to create tailored support plans to remove barriers and to support those children back into positive attendance habits. So step 8 is all about considering the support available to you. And the RISE attendance improvement page brings resources and support available to you together in one place. And colleagues are going to paste a link to that page in the chat so that you'll be able to access it. And the page also includes a link to the attendance toolkit for schools, which is a really useful handbook for schools to draw on. It offers advice on everything from building school culture, systems and procedures, to its recent update on transition practice. And that toolkit guidance would be a really helpful resource in the example that we've just taken a look at, where we saw that transition decline within the data. Within your Similar Schools report, we've provided every school with a higher performing schools for overall and persistent absence. These schools are in similar circumstances and have similar cohorts to yours. Now we're doing this to shine a light on great practice and to go on building communities of practice. That's the intention. So you might want to reach out to stronger schools to start building those connections. And here are some of the focus areas on the slide beneath, 7 different areas that feature in the toolkit that you might want to explore further with one of the schools identified in your own report. There's more support too. There are 2 further pathways of support available through attendance and behaviour hubs. And leads schools within each of the regions will be delivering enhanced support, and all eligible schools will receive 10 days of support from a lead school, which will include constructing an action plan together, delivering staff training and monitoring progress over time. The regional support offer provides access to open days at lead schools and access to CPD for leaders and staff across your school, and also a place within a regional network, again adding to and helping build those communities of practice. The foundations for success on attendance already exist in many schools. And where attendance is strong, leaders have built cultures where children feel safe, valued and aspirational. They implement simple, consistent systems and work in partnership with families, local authorities and the community to remove barriers. And those practices are both effective and replicable. This Similar Schools report brings together insights for your schools, including helpful comparisons to similar schools and that ladder back to at least pre-pandemic levels of attendance. The support that we've looked at today will provide you with strategies and resources that we know are making a difference on the ground. And our support package is designed to do just that, to support you, whatever your phase or context, to strengthen attendance in your setting. I'm really proud to be one of the attendance and behaviour ambassadors and look forward to continuing to work with leaders across the country to refine and expand this support offer, and also to celebrate the impact that we achieve together. I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for the work that you're already doing and for the work that you'll continue to go on doing.
Colleagues, before Laura takes us through how to access the report, I just wanted to do two things. First, we've been absolutely overwhelmed with the questions you're sending in today, so we're really grateful for your engagement. The team are working hard to answer as many of your questions as possible, but if we aren't able to answer your questions live, we will contact attendees after with responses. So please do continue to ask questions if you have them. We'll hear now from Bina Sisodia, who is going to talk to us about how her trust is contextualising the attendance baseline improvement expectations for their schools.
Hi, I'm Bina Sisodia and I'm the National Director for Inclusion at EACT. We are a national multi-academy trust consisting of 39 schools, serving some of the country's most deprived communities. And so our schools are not national average schools, and we serve some complex communities, which of course brings its own challenges, particularly when you're trying to raise attendance. We have high ambition for attendance, and this is reflected in two of our schools being chosen to be Rise Hub lead schools in the West Midlands. Attendance is a priority for us as a trust, right from board to parent, and our ambition is that all of our schools raise their attendance levels to pre-pandemic levels. We've reviewed the ABIEs for all of our schools and understand that they're floor targets. However, as a trust, we have high expectations and aspirations for our academies. We don't want ABIEs to be an anchor for ambition. We want schools to look up to the pre-pandemic benchmarks rather than looking down. Noting the external shocks we've seen over the year, we will continue to rigorously track and monitor our attendance data to be able to identify where and which points our data is declining so that we can put the necessary support in place to support our academies to drive attendance and reduce absence. With ABIEs being floor targets, we set more ambitious trust-defined targets that are based on the contextual needs of our academies to ensure that we are mapping the route of attendance back to the pre-pandemic levels.
I'm now going to take you through how to access your Similar Schools comparison reports. So the reports are hosted on For Your Education data, and you can sign in to VIED with your DFE sign-in details. So the login that you'll need is viewyourdata.education.gov.uk, which will pop into the chat now. And this is what you'll see when you go to the VIED homepage. All you need to do to log in is to click the green Start Now button that you can see circled on this slide on the left-hand side. When you click that, you'll then see a list of services. You may have different things in this list, depending on whether you're a school, a trust or a local authority, and what other things within VIED that you have access to. But the one that you need for this is the one called Monitor Your School Attendance, and you just click on Show on the drop-down arrow. After you click on Show, you'll see a number of key attendance-related data and reports that you can explore. Again, these will vary depending on your organisational type. For example, local authorities will see extra data sets around cross-border pupils, but the one you need here is Similar Schools Comparison Report. You'll then see three links. The first one will allow you to access your reports, and there's also two others. One is that you can download a methodology document which explains how we chose your similar schools and how we calculated your ABIE. And you can also navigate to our user guide on gov.uk for further information. The final screen here just shows you the folder in which your reports can be downloaded. Trusts and local authorities will have both summary reports and also zip files with schools' individual reports in them. If you don't have access to VIED, you can find out how to access your school attendance data on gov.uk, and we'll put a link to that page into the chat. Just to note, these are instructions for schools, and so we'll also post instructions for trusts and local authorities in the chat. It's very similar, but just a slightly different service that you choose when navigating to your reports. I'm now also just going to talk you through the Monitor Your School Attendance service if you've not used it already, because as well as hosting the similar school comparison reports, it has other tools to help schools, trusts, and local authorities track and analyse attendance data. This service takes the daily attendance data that schools were already required to share with us here at the Department for Education and presents it back to you in useful dashboards and reports. That means you can see patterns, identify pupils who may need support, and compare your attendance with other schools, all using data that you're already providing. The process of that is very straightforward. So schools are required to share daily attendance data with DFE. That's collected through our data aggregator called WAND, and then that data is then made available to you through the Monitor Your School Attendance service, which can be accessed by schools, your local authority, and your trust. The data is updated daily, so you're always working with current information up to the previous school day. We actually previously held a full webinar with an introduction to the Monitor Your School Attendance service, which we'll share a link to in the chat if you would like to find out more. So what tools and services are available on Monitor Your School Attendance? Well, the service provides different tools depending on your organisational type. As well as the similar schools comparison report we're discussing today, which you'll get every half term, you'll also get an attendance summary report, which compares your attendance and absence rates to national averages. For schools, you'll also get school attendance reports with data and insights into your school, pupil groups, and individual pupils, and compare your attendance tables to benchmark against local and national figures. Local authorities and trusts will also get dashboards with school and pupil level data and weekly attendance downloads. These tools allow you to identify trends in attendance patterns, identify pupils who may need support, save time building your own reports, compare your attendance locally and nationally, and inform discussions with leadership, governors, and trustees, all of which complements reporting that you get through MIS. I would really encourage you to explore what's available if you have not already. Now, just a bit of information about where you can get further help and information. If you need more information on the similar schools comparison reports or the Monitor Your School Attendance service that we've talked about today, you can find that in our user guide, which will pop into the chat. If you have any problems with access or using the tools or reports that we've talked about, then please raise an inquiry through our customer help portal and follow the steps shown here on the slide and also being posted in the chat. That will ensure that a customer support inquiry is raised and triaged to our experts who can assist in resolving your query as efficiently as possible. I'll now hand over to Alex to summarise the key messages for today's session.
Thanks, Laura. Before I summarise those, I did just want to pick up one or two of the key themes that have come through in the Q&A, and thanks again, colleagues, for your engagement today. The first question that's coming through really strongly is around the data tools available to special or AP settings. The reports we've talked about today are only available to mainstream schools, but we are working with the sector to understand what additional data tools might be helpful for SEND and AP settings. So watch this space. The second question coming through quite strongly is about schools with atypical age ranges. For these schools, we'd encourage you to look at the attendance bandings table at the end of the similar schools report and compare that against published year group attendance data to benchmark your attendance outcomes. And then the third question coming through is around the factors we've used to calculate the similar schools. We've covered this quite a bit in today's webinar, but to emphasise that the similar schools methodology, as Laura's just explained, is available on VIED, and that sets out the factors that we did and didn't include and explains some of the why behind that. That leaves it to me then just to summarise the key messages of today. The first is do access your report and analyse how the start of your term compares to schools like yours. The second is to zoom in on that improvement ladder we've talked about and consider your attendance baseline improvement expectation and the other benchmarks available to you. And the third is to look at the named higher performing schools and consider what support routes might support your continued attendance improvement, meeting that challenge that Kevin opened with. I really hope you found this afternoon session helpful. Thanks so much for joining and for all of your engagement. And please do take the time to fill out the short survey that we've posted in the Q&A. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you.